everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the Unlock Project podcast. I'm Mere, your host, and this podcast is brought to you by Greenovate Europe as part of this exciting EU-funded initiative. Our podcast is on a mission to explore the Unlock project and highlight how chicken feathers can transform into valuable resources for agriculture. It specifically aims to turn waste feathers into innovative, sustainable agricultural products, making farming more environmentally friendly. In our last episode, we met our project coordinator from Seedtech and got an overview of Unlock's mission. Today, we are diving deeper into the feather value chain, and I'm excited to introduce our partner, Farrelly&Mitchell, a global food and agribusiness consultancy. Our guest today is Dr. Michelle Riblet, director at Farrelly&Mitchell with over 20 years of experience in agri-food policy and regulation. She is here to help us understand what makes the Unlock model so unique. For this, we have split the podcast into two parts. In this first part, we will learn about the current practices in the poultry industry and explore many complex challenges of the feather value chain. In the second part, we continue our conversation and focus on strategies required to mitigate these challenges and learn how Farrelly&Mitchell's analysis contribute to the Unlock project. So let's start our conversation. So welcome, Michelle, to our second podcast episode. It's great to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us more about the role of Farrelly&Mitchell in the Unlock project?
Thank you, Morel. So my name is Dr. Michelle Riblet. I'm a director with Farrelly&Mitchell, and Farrelly&Mitchell are a global agri-food and business consultancy firm, and we work across the value chains on a range of projects, including due diligence, feasibility studies, research, and food safety and sustainability, both in terms of policy and legislation and implementation. So within the Project Unlock, our task as Farrelly&Mitchell as partners, we are responsible for a range of tasks, but particularly in two of the work packages, which are work package 2 and 3. And these are mainly the initial work packages of the project. We are responsible for looking at the very beginning of the study to look at the value chain analysis aspects of the poultry production chain. And this involved both desktop analysis and a series of stakeholder consultations. And that was really to gather information about the availability of feathers as a byproduct of the poultry industry, their quantification of the biomass of these feathers, and the regionality of the feathers as well. So where they are placed, or where the abundance of these byproducts across 5 target countries in Europe. And in particular, how they're currently managed within the industry, and then how that might look in the future following the work that's going to be part of the Unlock project. So that was the initial work, and at the moment now we're working on, I suppose, applying the demo cases then in the real life scenarios. This includes aspects like process simulation, market studies, and considering the appropriate plans for potential future biorefineries across the key European regions that have this poultry sector at a large scale.
Thank you for this introduction. And so to get started with the basics, can you provide us with an overview of the poultry production in the EU and how waste feathers are currently managed?
Yeah, so I suppose this was a key starting point for the project. And we know that the poultry production in Europe is a key sector and is quite a stable and growing sector. In terms of the feather waste management, it's an interesting question as it raises one of our key findings from the project to date. At the outset of the project, it was largely believed that the feathers were a waste stream from the poultry industry, with the majority ending up in landfill or incineration. But while this is true for most of the globe, we uncovered during our value chain analysis that this, in the EU in particular, and particularly for the larger slaughterhouses, the feathers are typically sent for rendering. So there is an outlet for for the feathers, and there is some value of the feathers, and they're sent into the rendering processing. So this process turns the feathers into feather meal, which is a useful ingredient in the likes of fertilizers and pet foods.
So in summary, poultry production in the EU generates a lot of waste, but there are actually already some measurements for rendering industries to turn feathers into something more valuable.
Exactly, yeah. So this is, I suppose, one of the findings that was a little bit surprising based on our initial analysis of the data and the research. So there is a demand, certainly at the moment, for the feathers, while the value at this point is still quite low for that waste stream.
So that's very interesting. And what makes the unlock model for waste feathers stand out from the existing practices? Could you explain what is the unique part about unlock?
Sure. I suppose the main distinguishing factor between Unlock's model and the existing feather practices is in the value addition. So as I mentioned, the value is currently a low value, or what we would consider low value. While there is a demand, that's no question, it's lower value. And the feathers are low cost ingredients with really minimal value addition for feather producers, and therefore minimum treatment at the processing level. So if we compare this to the unlock model, the feathers for the unlock processes need to undergo pre-treatment before being converted into an additive in the high value end products. So for example, in bioplastics for agricultural use. So within this model, greater care is required to be taken of the feathers from the beginning, so at the processor stage. And this is really important to ensure no degradation of the keratin, which is the protein that's really valuable that's being extracted, and to ensure that treated feathers are suitable then for use in these higher value end products. So in practice, this is really the key differences. The pre-treatment that will be needed at the processor level right up to the end manufacturing of the end products.
And so, of course, there are always challenges to consider. In your value chain analysis, you're focusing on challenges including logistics, infrastructure, feather availability, feather quality, EU legislation, and market hurdles. So can you please explain the main supply challenges? And let's start by focusing on logistic and infrastructure challenges.
So yes, if we take the challenges of both logistics and infrastructure, so these challenges are interconnected really, and they in particular relate to feather management processes, which are both currently in place and would be needed for the new processes under Unlock. So in terms of the logistics, what we have observed from our initial work in Work Package 2 is in terms of the regionality of the feathers and the distances between processing plants and rendering plants, there is that, I suppose, significant distances in some cases, which then impacts the environmental footprint of transporting the feathers from over these long distances. So this is a case where in order to overcome this obstacle, there will be investment in infrastructure required in order to reduce that environmental impact and to convert, I suppose, or pre-treat the feathers at the very start of the chain, so we don't have those large volumes of feathers moving across Europe as well.
Perfect. Thanks for explaining this. It's very interesting to understand how much the transportation or long distance transportation is impacting the environmental footprint of the value chain. But moving on now to the next challenge of feather availability and feather quality.
Why are those crucial for the value chain, and what are the main challenges?
Okay. So if we look at both feather availability, firstly, so I suppose what we have seen, as we mentioned, is there is that current demand for the feathers at the moment, And while it is used and possibly a lower value product, there is that demand for it for the across Europe, really, for use in fertilizers and feeds. So there will be then the competition between the existing market and unlocks value chains in terms of the feather availability. And the value proposition related to better value for feathers will have to stand up then in the eye of the processors, and in particular in terms of the additional infrastructure which would be required to undertake the cleaning and pre-treatment of the feathers prior to transport. So that is a challenge. It certainly can be overcome, but that is, I suppose, one of the challenges we see with the availability of the biomass. Then I suppose as a very interlinked is the challenge with quality. And it's really important that we have the quality of the feathers is maintained. At the moment, there is minimum processing, really, it's for the feathers. So there will be that need to, I suppose, invest in terms of the infrastructure, but also to be able to manage at a processor level the cleaning and the new processes that will be needed, and the pre-treatment of the feathers at the processors level. So all of these additional processes will need both people and technical staff to undertake and to do a check. So it's another layer, I suppose, of work at the processor level, but that will be counterbalanced by the additional value that we would create with these products. So these two are important, but definitely ones that can be overcome once we show the value proposition of the new products, and then that will create that higher value product, higher value for the feathers, the pre-treated feathers at the processors level.
And so when it comes to EU regulations, what are the current challenges that affect the use of feathers in bioplastics?
So in terms of regulations and policies, I suppose this is always quite a complex area in general, and in particular for new areas like the bioeconomy, new legislation on the EU Green Deal, etc. So it's really important for the project to keep up to date with the changing policies and legislation. And in particular, this is an evolving area for the whole bioplastics area as well, and biodegradable plastics. So, or biodegradable materials. So at the moment, we have a very robust regulatory frameworks in place for many years, which governs animal byproducts. And this then gives us a very clear direction on the criteria that needs to be followed for processing animal byproducts, and in particular for the poultry feathers, which are relevant to this project. At the moment, because it's a new area, it's the legislation and the policy and legislation around bio-based, biodegradable and compostable plastics is in development. So we do have a new policy framework on sourcing, labeling and use of bio-based plastics, and the use of biodegradable and compostable plastics. So this is, I suppose, underway. The project is keeping a close eye on the changes and the new legislation that will come from that policy framework. And it's really important that the new legislation clearly sets out criteria for the use of animal byproducts in bioplastics, and in particular that it aligns with the existing definitions, the categorizations and the principles under the existing animal byproducts product legislative framework. So we're really, this I suppose for us is really important in order to really clarify what can and can't be used, the processes for treatment, etc. So we're watching this space, and we're consulting with many of the policymakers in this area, and we would hope then that the barriers that currently exist because of the lack of legislation would certainly be overcome with this new directive and the new law for this evolving area. So it is probably a challenge at the moment, or what we might consider a barrier if we were to go into the market now, but this will be something that's going to be rectified through the new legislation. So this is a large area, complex area, but we work, and particularly Farrelly&Mitchell are responsible, I suppose, for keeping the project updated on the EU legislation. So this is an area that we work closely with the key stakeholders on.
That's perfect. Good to know that there are ongoing discussions in the regulatory landscape for feathers in bioplastics.
And now focusing on the last challenge, market challenges. When it comes to selling feather-based bioplastics in the market, what are the difficulties?
So I suppose the final challenge is a significant challenge, and the market challenge. At the moment, I suppose once the unlocked products reach the market, they will have to compete with both the conventional plastics and the alternative bioplastics, which at the moment are on sale. So this will be what we see as a challenge to overcome, and will require a very strong value proposition from the unlocked products. Perhaps related to tailored degradation times. And this is an important quality. And as Sarah had mentioned that in the last podcast. So maybe the unique difference then between the existing or the alternative bioplastics currently on the market and our new products under Project Unlock will be the degradation time. So this, I suppose, is one area that the project is really focusing on. Work was also been undertaken throughout the project to involve the stakeholders within the industry, and then to just assess their readiness for adopting such products. So again, this is really important for us to really understand the thinking of the stakeholders and how they will react, I suppose, to new products such as Project Unlock products, and the pricing and the value propositions that's needed to be aligned with their expectations from the stakeholders.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for outlining the last challenge. We stopped the first part of this episode now here. Thank you for being with us in this first part. We have learned how waste feathers are currently managed, and we have taken a closer look at the various challenges in the feather value chain, such as logistics, infrastructure, feather availability, and market challenges. And in the second part, we continue our conversation and dive even deeper. We will discuss strategies to overcome these challenges, the necessary evolution of EU regulations, and how this analysis of Farrelly&Mitchell fits into the broader aim of the Unlock project. So stay with us for part 2, and thank you for joining us so far.